Will Mikels-Carrasco is a powerful researcher in microplastics, and their work is fascinating. Although the numbers tell a scary story, their work yields hopeful and critical solutions. Learn how in just 2 years, Will moved from researching for class to having their own published papers, and how anybody and everybody, including you, can make a difference. But really, it's all about plastics. Just a small lump of microplastics can unfortunately kill an animal and destabilize an entire food chain. So is there hope? The answer may surprise you. Good evening, Will. Thanks for joining us. Can you just tell me before we start a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from and kind of why you decided to start this Instagram page?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a 17-year-old from northern Indiana. So there's a lot of I've spent a lot of time in nature. My mom is an ecologist, so I've always been around this sort of thing. And ever since I was little, I've hated like seeing our planet be hurt by like pollution and like global warming and stuff like that. And then when I started high school, I kind of decided to do something about it. So, my sophomore year, I started my like really delving into my actual research. So, a lot of it has to do with I study like the possible effects of things that on animals and plastics. So, my main thing is trying to develop a water treatment that would allow for animals in aquatic environments to kind of better process microplastics and prevent trophic transfer. So that's like the brunt of my research personally. And then to the Instagram page was just something was like I felt like I wanted to like do a little more than that. And like I figured, well, I know so much about plastics anyway, because I have to know it for my research. I can just, post about it, tell people, try to spread that awareness. Because I think the more people who understand the issue, the more people who will care.
It's amazing to see on your Instagram as well. I've seen like two of them, the formulas you include, and then there was that one. It was like the couple different steps we can do, mostly how prevalent microplastics are and how we can mitigate them. So I think you definitely have an impact there. Can I ask, in terms of your research, so how exactly did you find that position? And then also can you elaborate too on the water treatment, both of those?
Yeah. So my school has I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity that my school has a science research program. So we're allowed as students to like submit, research ideas, and if they're approved, we get to, kind of study them as one of our classes. So I started my sophomore year, I studied the effects of hydrolase enzymes on the survival and development of a tremor brine shrimp when exposed to microplastics. And so what I did was I had an enzyme solution that I was using, and I tested its effects on how brine shrimp colonies when exposed to microplastics, if the enzymes I had chosen helped. And I actually found that they did to a degree. So I was, super excited about that. So I finished that paper at the end of my sophomore year. And then I had the opportunity because one of the professors at my local IU, Indiana University, was like interested in my research. So beginning of my junior year, I had the opportunity to move my research to her lab. So there I've been studying, I've been looking into amphipods and bacteria. So the amphipods I'm using instead of the brine shrimp because I can monitor like the effects on behavior a little more than I could with brine shrimp. And studying bacteria to see because that's a little more like less invasive of a treatment for water because a lot of bacteria live in water anyway. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And what do you hope to find then with the arthropods? What exactly, I guess, because you mentioned how the microplastics, you're studying how microplastics are affecting those arthropods.
So what my research mostly is trying to find something that can be put in water, like a water treatment that would help smaller animals process microplastics without it harming them. So that microplastics aren't being transferred up the food chain, just trying to like protect the integrity of ecosystems at the lowest level through like hopefully non-invasive treatment.
And when you say transfer up the food chain, does that mean that it goes from like a small fish? I like your bird, by the way.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
what's its name, by the way?
This is Takami. I raised her since she was a chick and fell out of her nest.
Oh, that's amazing. She saved him. Very cool. Sorry. So yeah, you mentioned when it moves up the food chain. So it's starting, you're saying, with smaller fish, and then it's moving up. How high will it like reach humans? That high, or how high will it go?
So microplastics can kind of they're since they're so small, they can move through basically anything. A lot of what happens in nature for how they're so harmful is that like really small things like amphipods or brine shrimp will consume them, and then the next level, the trophic level, will consume them, then the next. And when they get into larger animals, they can cause like a ton of damage by like building up in their guts. And if we can definitely get to humans, I think we've seen there's been instances of fish caught in the wild that people are eating that have microplastics in them. So it's an issue that will end up affecting like every living thing on Earth.
And that's, yeah, you say it affects everyone and every living thing. And also, I mean, it's so prevalent, right? I mean, plastics are kind of
Mhm.
in everything at this point, and clothing, and the polyethylene specifically that you study. What are some of the major products that polyethylene is in?
So it's in a lot of styrofoam, a lot of plastic bags. It's actually in a surprising amount of like beauty products.
Okay.
And it breaks down super quickly into the microplastics. Um, So it's most microplastics are polyethylene plastics.
So okay, so that's like the major category. I see. And is that out of curiosity? Because I think there, if I'm not mistaken, I think there are seven major types of plastic. That might be wrong, but I'll check after. But is polyethylene, is it able to be recycled out of curiosity? Do you know that?
I actually do not know if it can be recycled. That's something I guess a gap in my research. A lot of what I know about it is more like chemical formulas and like, what can break it down. Because that's a little closer to what I study.
Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit then? Specifically,
Yeah, sure.
with how it's broken down in the water?
Um, so let me just pull up the actual things. I don't want to just get
Of
something wrong
course.
here. So the one of the what was my index there? So polyethylene, it's a polyethylene resin. So it's a the polymer is made from uh, it's basically a mixture of carbon and hydrogen at its like base level. So that means it's relatively easy to break down, but not to like a full like extent, I suppose. So it becomes microplastic. It's very prone to becoming a microplastic, I guess is the best way I could describe it. And then with so there are enzymes that can theoretically break it down the full way, like a PETase, I believe it's called. I believe it was developed in Japan. But that's like very hard to come by, and it's a very like involved process. So a lot of it's very hard to fully break down in like a natural environment, I suppose.
And that's, it seems like some of the worries then too, with the plastics being in the environment so long, is that they'll stay there
Mhm.
so long.
Definitely.
So that'll be interesting to look into. Do you have any idea, by the way, of the scale of microplastics in the water or on land?
Yeah, I think the exact number would be something like so. There are currently well, as of last year, I suppose, there were 5.25 trillion pieces of micro and macroplastic in the Earth's ocean, because these notes are from last year. Um, so it's an incredibly like inconceivable almost number.
You said over 5 trillion tons, was that? Or pounds?
Pieces,
Oh, pieces,
5 billion
right? Pieces,
individual pieces.
right? That makes more sense. Yeah, I've heard before. I think like the Great Garbage Patch in the Pacific Ocean. I think that's predominantly larger plastics, but it almost sounds like,
Yeah.
in a way, are these? It sounds like these microplastics might be more harmful than larger plastics, because larger plastics you can clean up somewhat easily. Like if you see
Mhm.
a plastic bag on the ground or a water bottle, you can pick that up. Is it? I'm not sure exactly how much your research goes into this, but is it challenging to clean those up? Because you mentioned that chemical
Oh,
you want to put in water to clean it up.
so definitely. So even like with the my research, the idea almost isn't because it's almost impossible to fully clean microplastics out of an area. That's part of what like makes them so dangerous. So my research is almost more trying to like, okay, these are here. We can't get rid of them, unfortunately. Can we prevent them from causing harm? So most of what I do is trying to like look at like, well, if we put this in the water, does this allow the animals to not be so grievously affected by these? Because it is truly like kind of impossible to remove microplastics once they're like prevalent in an area, at least fully remove them.
That's a little scary thought, but it's nice to hear that there's researchers like you trying to stop that. And have you found anything so far, either in your last research or now, that might be leading to somewhat of a solution on how we can stop them from harming animals?
So I don't know about solution, but I did find that I used a formula based in just kind of over the counter digestive enzymes was what I used,
Okay.
hydrolysis based, and using that I did find in brine shrimp colonies where that treatment was applied alongside microplastics, there was a higher rate of survival and in the brine shrimp and activity in the brine shrimp. So well, like I don't like to use the word result because I'm not I don't feel like it's that giving people false hope, like giving a false hope like that is like a good thing. I do feel like that does point to like, okay, there might be something here. There might be the path to a solution.
I love that. That's actually very well phrased too. Yeah, not giving false hope. I like that. It sounds like you're very like science oriented, but also have that kind of, it seems like the necessary social part, I suppose, with any climate thing, right? There's like a lot of solutions
Hmm.
people throw out, but then don't actually work. So I kind of like your perspective on that. Can I ask, what would it look like if you had to walk me through an experiment? What would it look like?
So yeah, so I do I can for my blind shrimp experiments, those were a little different. So I'll do those because I think they're kind of a better example because I've also done way more of them.
Yeah, of course.
So I would keep 5 tanks at a time. Say I would give them the same amount of food. It'd be the same amount of brine shrimp in each tank. Two would receive the microplastics. No, three would receive the microplastics. Two would be controls, so just living their best life. Um, and then of the ones with microplastics, two would receive the treatment. And so no, two would receive the treatment. One of the ones with the treatment wouldn't have microplastics because I also wanted to be sure that when I'm giving them to treat the microplastics isn't harming them on themselves. So, and then over the course of 2 week periods, I would monitor their activity, like a rough estimate of amount of shrimp in the tanks. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, I would filter out 10 milliliters of water and just take account of how many shrimp are alive and how many are dead within 10 milliliters.
Okay.
So that kind of gave me like, okay, survival and just like general well being.
And I know you mentioned this a little bit already, but what were the exact numbers of that? You mentioned that they survived better in one case with the treatment.
Yeah, so I found that the treatment on its own didn't seem to have any adverse or positive effects.
Okay.
And the treatment with the microplastics, they fared better than the ones without the treatment and just the microplastics. They had higher survival and activity.
That's amazing. That's also promising. You said if the ones who were given the treatment but didn't have microplastics, they weren't adversely affected,
Hmm.
then I guess that might be
Yeah.
good too, because in theory you can't harm them too much. So hopefully there's no benefit, there's no downside to, I suppose, using too much. So that's amazing. So and you mentioned too, so this initial research was done sophomore year.
Hmm.
What and then you went to Indiana University after. That's very impressive. What I suppose what will the research do then? Will you be published or will it go on to will this try to how do I say this? Will this research then be conducted at like a larger scale and maybe tested in an actual aquatic environment? Or I guess where do you hope for that to go?
So my goal is to get like published by the end of my junior year. So depending on how the bacteria experiments go, will depend on that. And then once I found a treatment that I think, okay, this is not having adverse effects, this is positively helping, I would like to test it in like a natural environment. But there's just a lot of variables there that I have to test it against like a range of animals and like a range of plants because like I can't in good conscience just be like, well, we'll see what happens to
Right.
like a pond because like that would be just like that's a net negative, even if the treatment does help with the microplastics. So ideally, I would love to like actually try it in a practical. That's just like a ways off for me.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it, I think. So switching gears just a little bit, because I know you mentioned before we started you had kind of your interest started freshman year. Can you describe exactly how you got into this? I mean, it's not too often that you see like juniors in high school, 17-year-olds, working with so much research. Can you describe a little bit how you came into this area and then I suppose where you end up hoping to go after?
Yeah. So I kind of always wanted to pursue science. Both my parents are scientists. I've always found it super interesting. And my freshman year, I was like, looking into it. I was in like, science classes, but I was like, I want to do more. Um, and I just like had this idea. I was like, well, like looking at like, plastic pollutions in the world, it's just like something that's like, it really seems like a pointless issue to fight almost because it's so overwhelming. I
Mm.
was like, what if we didn't fight it and we, just found a way to protect things within it? And so I started like looking into like solutions for that like my freshman year. And then my biology teacher suggested me for the science research class at the end of that. And so it's just kind of crescendoed from there. And then as for where it's going, I want to definitely like get my degree in a science field. I think I told you in all messages that I wanted to do either biophysics or biotech, and because I feel like because I love biology, it's always been like my favorite part of science,
Mhm.
and I feel like something like that would be like kind of working with it in other ways to like help me like allowing me to like try to find answers to problems like I'm trying with my research. So I want to keep with this research definitely, and I want to keep doing other things and just like trying to use science to like fix or and if not fix like help problems like protect things where we can.
Nice. Yeah, so protecting them because lots of the adverse climate effects sadly already here. So I kind of like that, protecting them where they're at. And so you mentioned biophysics was one of the possibilities. I'm sure you know, but definitely include that research in your applications. You have a very bright application there, I think. So that's interesting. So yeah, you mentioned you started, what was it? So 2 years ago then, very young. Do you, so at school, is there anything, you mentioned that you're in the science class, which sounds very, it sounds unique, but also like a really good opportunity. Are there other students who are also pursuing climate research at your school?
Yeah, so like in a lot of different ways. I have one of my friends on the science Olympiad team actually.
Nice.
Um is she's working with I she would be better to tell you because I'm not good with engineering, but with batteries in cars, like trying to make electric cars more efficient and more affordable to make and maintain. Is her research, and then another one of my friends is working with um algae as like a air treatment, and that's in relation to climate change. So there's definitely like I saw a ton of like really brilliant people who are like you know working towards similar goals, and it's great to like be able to connect with them and work together.
Yeah, that's amazing you're connecting. I think that's really key. I did Science Olympiad as well. So I don't know what event that would be, the electric vehicle one. Maybe it's new. Do you do Science Olympiad out of curiosity or
Yes, I love my team. It's one of like my favorite hobbies. I do this year I'm doing astronomy, um fossils, dynamic planet geomapping, and robot. But I've
okay.
done it since my freshman year and I adore it.
That's amazing. Dynamic Planet's a good one too. I think I did that one for like 4 years. It switches a lot, but it seems like it'd be kind of something you're interested in. So, well, that's amazing. Yeah, and on that same kind of course too. So you mentioned you have friends who are invested in the climate, and then you're in Science Olympiad. Are there other kind of clubs you're in at school that are related?
I'm mostly there's other clubs at my school that I'm not personally in. Like we have a recycling club, and then I am in the National Honor Society, and a lot of people use their projects for like their NHS projects for climate related reasons. Like I know, I think it was 2 years ago, one of the people in it organized like a really big like awareness event. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, but they used that as an example when they were telling us about like all projects that we could choose this year. So there's definitely like a lot of like activism at my school. It's just really great to see that like, the younger generation is prepared to like fight for our planet.
Yeah, that's amazing. You guys are inspiring. So it's cool to hear. It really is. And just like for anybody watching this as well, I think use this as an example. It's nice to see too how you're doing like physical research. I like that because I mean, there's obviously a lot of Instagram influencers and everything, and I like your side of that. But the physical research seems very key as well. Actually doing the research on that, trying to apply it to a broader scale. So I think the research is going to go far. A last point, because I think we covered most of the sort of chemical equations and solutions and the physical aspects of the research. On a broader scale, do you know of any other people, I suppose, conducting similar research? Because I know microplastics are very extensive. I'm sure there's others, but is anybody else covering a similar area as you with this?
Yeah, I think there's like a ton of people. I don't
Uh,
have names in front of me, but like my research is like greatly inspired by like I think there were Japanese researchers who were studying the I think I mentioned it before, the PET ACE enzyme from it's from a bacteria and it can break down plastics. And that was like my first thing, like, oh, that's like, a solution.
mhm.
So there's like a ton of people who are doing similar research. Yeah, I'm trying to look for if I can find. But so I there's my research is definitely inspired by like a ton of other people doing similar work, which is like almost like kind of the nature of science, in my opinion, is like a bunch of people working in parallel to each other on similar things. So yeah, I don't claim to be the someone who just thought of this. It's definitely inspired by like generations of scientists who came before me and people who are working and way smarter and more knowledgeable on the subject than I am. But I'm grateful that I can like be a small part of it.
No, it's amazing, and you'll get there too. You'll get there, and it's cool too because when you're in college, you'll probably have an opportunity to work with a lot of them. So, with these same scientists, so that's very cool. So, as we kind of wrap up here, I have two broad questions. You can feel free to take a second to think about it because it's not exactly it's like not exactly easy. So the first one is going to be knowing what you know and how you've worked so far in this area, right? Just in the climate area in general. What's one piece of advice you would give to someone else who wants to start? You can think about it in this way, probably someone younger, like a youth, kind of like yourself. Um, but yeah, what's one piece of advice you would give them on how to start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would just kind of say that this like any understanding gives you like power almost, like because like the entire climate thing and like hearing that as like kind of someone growing up and that with that, which I honestly feel like you would probably, because you're like college age, right? So
You're right,
you've
yeah.
like grown up seeing that like, oh, the world is on fire and that's just happening, and all natural resources are depleting, and that's like that's scary, especially when you're younger. But just understanding like the depth of the issue and understanding the the ins and outs and like what is actually happening allows you to see, okay, so if XYZ is happening, I can do ABC about it. And I feel like that's just like the best way to approach it. It's like that's how I try to approach it, at least, that like, yeah, bad things are happening and that is scary, but if we understand those bad things, we can protect what matters. And understanding is where we can like get that power to protect from.
That's amazing. Yeah, so knowledge, understanding is power. That's good. especially because I think you mentioned in the very beginning, right, that you used to be overwhelmed kind of by all the issues.
Mhm.
And then,
Definitely.
so when you started researching, it helped calm your nerves a little bit and give you a path.
Yeah, it's definitely it allows you to like I suppose like look at things logically, which is in my opinion at least like a more stable way to view things.
Definitely more stable. Yes, I love that. And then the last thing is, I think we covered a lot. I'm actually very impressed by how much you know about polyethylene and that research specifically. I did a similar, well, I shouldn't even say similar. Last year in high school, right, as a senior, I did a very quick experiment with my teacher, kind of related to bioplastics. Again, I didn't really understand like the formulas that much. It was four different chemicals. I mean, one of them was water. So, it's four different things. So definitely not the same scale, but it's kind of fun, I feel like sometimes to kind of run your own experiment. And I'm just impressed by how much you know. So knowing that, is there anything you think that we didn't talk about today related to either your research or your motivation? Is there anything there that we haven't discussed yet that you think we should cover?
I don't not that I can think of. I think I covered like the broad strokes of my research. So um like everything that's like necessary to like understand at least where it's coming from. I think we covered.
Excellent. So yeah, I hope anybody watching this will get a broad understanding about your research specifically, but also how to conduct research at any level. You don't have to be, super old or be like published, right? Already. You have to start somewhere.
Mhm.
So I love that so much. So thank you again for joining us, Will, and have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.